It's showtime. Hi, I don't know if are you going to introduce this?
You go ahead, Tim.
Okay, this is Tim Stensager. I'm Data Governance Director from OSPI, and I'm kind of teeing this early warning intervention systems conversation up. So I'm going to give you a slide here, if I can get to it. Trying to. Almost there. It's so hard when you can't interact with folks. Okay. So you should see a slide up here that says student information and K-12 warehouse. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about CEDARS and student information systems. So, and the complexity of all of this work. The slide here is kind of a depiction of that system, and depending on where you are, what kind of data you have and what's available to you. So in the state of Washington, there are 8 student information systems. So many of you may use Skyward, there's PowerSchool, there's Schoolmaster, there's a variety of vendors, and districts are, because of local control, allowed to purchase whatever student information system they want. And you design it any way you'd like in order to service your needs and to give you the information you need for your students, and for also there's HR systems for human resources and fiscal systems. I'm going to focus today on the student information portion of that only. So when I call it an SIS, that stands for Student Information System, it's basically a data warehouse for your students, and it'll have their name and their age and enrollment information, their address, etc. It would also include attendance information and grade information, and you compile that data and you use it at the school district in the past any way you see fit. And probably 7 or 8 years ago, there was a requirement, especially from the federal government, to compile some of this data and send it up to them. And the first compiling of this data was a system that the state designed called CEDARS, and if you've been around for a while, you are familiar with the first 25 elements that the state of Washington, through OSPI, required the districts to send. It was basic enrollment information at that point in time, and some grade information. That warehouse design was not adequate to service all the needs, and it couldn't answer all the questions people had. So I believe it's been 5 years ago or so, they redesigned the warehouse, and now it's called CEDARS. And it's an acronym for something. I don't know the acronym name, and if you were to go to the OSPI website and type in the search engine there, CEDARS, you could look at the manual. I believe now the CEDARS manual has somewhere around 200 elements that your district has to upload into the system. So we've gone from about 20 to 200. And there are now more drivers than the federal system, although there's about 400 reports that the EdFax system, federal government, requires us to send up. So you give us your data, we scrub it, and we reformat it, and we send it up to the EdFax system, and then the federal government uses that system to do some comparative analytics at their level, and then they make policy and legislative decisions based on that data. So now I'm going to come back down to that green box there that's called the Student Information System. So you're actually the owners of the data that is compiled in the Student Information System. And data has 3 dimensions. It's got to be timely, actionable, and accurate. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of those. Actionable means you compile it in a way that you can do something with it, that it informs you and it allows you to do program improvements. It may just be some basic information, but you may want to do something that's more sophisticated with it. And more mature early warning systems actually look at this data in a very sophisticated way, and Spokane's going to go into their detail about how they do that. So that's actionable. Then it's got to be accurate, because if you are going to do some actions on something, you want to make sure that the data is accurate, and there are problems all along the system in terms of accuracy. want to give you a heads up that we'll be working on a data quality initiative. We're working on it right now with the ESDs on the discipline accuracy because the legislature is very interested on disproportionality, the amount of Hispanic or African American students who are suspended compared to how they are represented in the student population. And I've got some concern. I believe there's disproportionality. I'm still not sure how accurate your discipline data is in all those systems. And we will still compile the reports that you send to us and give it to the legislators. So quality matters, and the legislators will still make legislation based on what you've turned into us, and it's going to be more and more important as we move forward. So that's accurate. Now let's talk about timely. And timely depends on where you sit in any organization. And on the horizontal axis that starts with that tactical on the red line, you've got teacher and counselor. So if you're really tactical, you need data on a daily basis because you're looking at kids' progress. And you need that data as quickly as it comes available, whether it's attendance or discipline or office discipline referrals or whether they've turned in their homework, whatever it is, you need to have that at your fingertips. And if you have then on top of your student information system or embedded within your student information system some type of a dashboard that can give you a heads up, then you can create action based on that data. If you're at a grade level or a department level, you don't need the data necessarily on a daily basis. You certainly would need it at a weekly basis, and the types of reporting that you would require from that system may look somewhat different. You may group the kids differently than you would if you were just a teacher or a counselor. If you move over to the right, then you have schools who normally have department meetings at the school level, maybe bi-monthly or monthly, so your data, again, would be re-crunched in order to serve the needs of that larger group, and ultimately then the district. And I don't know how often your board or your central office looks at this kind of district-wide data. And they, again, probably monthly, maybe biannually, they look at that. And all of that information normally would reside in your student information system, and you control all of that data. If you recall, I said there's about 200 elements you send to CEDARS, and then we transition over from that green triangle to that that blue. I don't know what kind of. That's not a rectangle. It's got 4 sides though. Is it a trapezoid? So you feed to the K-12 warehouse CEDARS, and that's where you move from school board down on that horizontal line to OSPI, ESDs, and you keep moving to the right to the state governmental agencies, whether it's the legislature or governor or other policy-making type folks like the State Board of Education, and eventually up to the federal government or any other federal federally curious people or advocacy groups. It would come from this large warehouse. And they would look at it more on an annual basis. So if you are further on the right on that scale, you're more in a strategic arena. You're looking at large policy questions or laws, or you're looking at funding to provide strategic planning and capacities for school districts and schools. And as you go further down toward the left, then the day-to-day work is more tactically oriented, and you're making decisions. As there is frustration in the system, as I've been in this game for a while, what happens is the higher the frustration on the strategic end, the more tactical the policies and laws become. So instead of creating capacities for us, they create mandates for us. And so I just want to put that out there. So I think it works better if we own our own stuff and we make those daily decisions, because you're closer to the students and to the concerns, and hopefully then you're using data and your dashboards to make good decisions, and ultimately you're using outcome measures such as graduation rates or lowering discipline rates or increasing attendance. You're looking at outcome measures that make a difference and ultimately affect the students. And also looking at those kids who are normally invisible to the system, the kids who have been underserved traditionally. So sophisticated early warning systems look at those underserved kids and give your systems the heads up in order to do some work. I think that's it from me.
That sounds pretty good. Let's do a quick poll to see who out there is currently using a data-based dropout early warning intervention system. And if you're not, I'd be curious if you wanted to put in why you're not using one as well.
The poll is open. We should have music now playing because we just wait for the votes to come in.
Oh, thank you.
I could sing Jeopardy if that would help.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
How many votes are in?
We got 39% have voted at the moment. Filling up quickly. That looks pretty good. We're holding steady, so I'm going to close the poll and share it out with you guys. We can't see it here, but I'll tell you guys that we have 27% say that they do at a high school level only, 9% at the middle and high school, 9% at the have district-wide, 55% of those that responded are interested in pursuing one but do not have one. So it's nice to see so many out there excited about district-wide ones as well. Why don't we transfer this over to Travis over in Spokane, and he can talk about how Spokane developed and is using their database early warning system.
That sounds great.
All right, you should have it, Travis.
All right, there we go. So before we dive into the actual our framework that we use with all of our leaders, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we use data. So on my screen right now, you can see our overall big picture goal in our district is T24, technical school or military, 2-year degree or 4-year degree. And the reason I bring that one up is because our goal with any data set is to triangulate or use multiple sets to really inform the work. So as you can see under T24, there's 3 main areas that we focus our data. One is on the graduation rate, but then while we're looking at graduation rate, we're also looking at cohort retention. And as we're looking at those 2 things, we're also looking at college direct. And the reason for that is it develops a common language around what the work is to develop students that are going to be successful in this T24 system. So for example, you could totally focus on increasing the graduation rate, and then it's actually a positive if some of your lower achievers or your students that are not necessarily earning credit fall out of your system. That's a positive because your graduation rate is actually going to increase. If you could also focus 100% on cohort retention and make your the experience through high school not as rigorous, and you're probably going to increase the number of students that hold on to graduation, but your college direct numbers would be very low because or your remediation numbers would be very high. So ultimately, with any data set that we use, our goal is to put it in an efficient manner that's interpreted for leaders and that they can lead around instantly. So this is an example I wanted to share on that because we have been talking about the graduation rate. So overall, I'm going to be dragging some stuff over to the screen. First thing we're seeing here is this is our framework. This is where all of our data is held and released out to leaders. Every single leader in the district, whether they're in a school or at the central office, have access to what we call data tools. Inside of this, you can see that our main framework around instruction and college and career readiness sits up here. That's the Think, Know, Act, Go part. And then all of our early warning system pieces sit down here under support. So that's where we look at school culture, the early warning system, and everything else. So if I dive into that, into the early warning system, right off the bat you're going to see this is that global look that looks overall at a school. So this top left here is talking about weekly unexcused absences in 9th grade. That's just a picture right now at one of our high schools of the number of unexcused absences in the last 7 days per 200 students. The reason we do it per 200 students is so we can compare all the way across our system. So as you can see right from this screen is we're giving a big picture look on key data pieces that we went through a process to define inside of our system. So I'm sitting here with Jameis Hutchins. He's one of our programmers, and he's been kind of the brains behind a lot of this work on putting data out there in a usable format. So I'm going to let him talk a little bit about the study we did, how we came up with our indicators, and all of that kind of thing, and then I'll dive back in. Go ahead, Jameis.
So 3 years ago, we worked with some of our community partners and did a cohort study on our class of 2008 and 2010. And they did a data regression on that and identified different risk factors at the different levels, because we didn't want our early warning system to just focus on high school, because we knew if we really wanted to impact our graduation rate, we had to look all the way down to elementary school. So there were 5 different risk factors that were developed for elementary schools, and then 8 for high school and middle schools. And each of those levels had different weightings for the different issues. So, for example, based on our study, an elementary student that had 4 more unexcused absences during their elementary career was 5 times as likely to drop out of school at some point during their career with us in Spokane. So we really wanted to be really intentional on those data points, so we can identify those students at risk, but then also our leaders can identify those students that are either tripping those risk factors or nearing those tipping points, so you can really have a positive impact on those students. So out of that study, we developed some of our indicators to roll out to our leaders in our school data tools. And each one of those indicators are given a little button in the school data tools to indicate what level they're at based on the current data that's available to them. Because we really wanted our data to be actionable, so we're interpreting the data for them to let them know how they're doing as a whole, and get recent data so they can react quickly to those students. So around our early warning system, a lot of it, like all these other early warning studies that have been done across our nation, is really focusing on attendance, behavior, discipline, and then our course failures. But we wanted to triangulate those data points so they can see as a whole, how's our attendance doing as a school, how's our discipline as a school, and then how is our course completion doing as a school as well.
So a high school leader in this situation would be looking at this first view, and very clearly one of the first places to dive into would be attendance and course failures. And so the next level is they can click into any one of these, and to make it a little bit more efficient, I'm going to drag some views over so you can see them.
Go one level deeper.
So if I want to dive into absences, I can click in there, and you can see all the different ways that we're going to report out absences for our leaders. So these are all Tableau visualizations based on specific data. So if I want to look at So here what you can see is this is in demo mode, so you're just not going to see any student names, so it's going to load a little bit slower. But you're going to see students down the left-hand side, what grade level, and then this is basically taking all of the different absence codes and putting them out there for a kid with a total picture of how many absences they have. how many total absences they have and why. Now, one of the goals of this is anytime we put student level data out there, our leaders were constantly asking, well, how do we get, I want to know more. So as I'm diving into student attendance, I want to know how this student is doing around credit accumulation, or how many Fs do they have right now. So they, at any time, they can click in and see the ins and outs of a particular student. So this is a fake student. This student has tripped all of the, just a second, it'll load. So this student has tripped all of the indicators, and you can see those across the top up here. You can look at kind of what their experiences look like over the course of the last few months. Here you can see semester grades, and then you can also see live grades right here, discipline incidents, attendance timeline, and then this is all of the different test scores that we have, ranging from state level assessments to district assessments. So part of the goal is we want a one-stop shop for all pieces of data for a leader to be able to access. So right there, the catalyst in that was diving into attendance. So now if we wanted to start looking at grades, credit accumulation, we can also dive into that piece. So let's let this one load real quick. So what you're seeing here is on this far left-hand side, this is a very quick view of every single grade pulling out of the grade book constantly. So these are live grades by department. So then I can go in and I can take a look at any department. So math has 174 Fs in it right now. So I can click into there, and it will then show me all of the math classes that have Fs. I can decide, okay, you know what, I'm seeing way too many Fs in Algebra 2 or Algebra 1 or whatever. I can click into that, and I can get all the way down to the student level by teacher. So again, the goal is to provide actionable data where leaders have access to the same information constantly, so they can intervene if necessary, they can celebrate if it's appropriate, and so on. So pretty much all of the visualizations that we put out are really focused on making sure that the level of data helps leaders make decisions in a timely fashion. Let's see, another area that you saw in the first view was around student management. So again, we have a view of student management. This is a tree graph of all student management at that school. Their highest, their consequence, the largest number of consequences, lunch detention. You can see it's because of disruptive conduct in this situation. You can compare them across all of our schools. You can look at less serious discipline. You can look at serious discipline. You can basically drill all the way down to every single one of the students that's involved in any of these incidents. We do put schools in a position where they are being compared to their to the other schools. We want them working together. We want to push them in their thinking, and so we do provide data that constantly compare schools. So the way this is built out is right now we just looked into the early warning system part, which is probably the piece that our schools are using most right now. We provide incoming student data very early, so come February, a high school will get all of their information on the middle schools that are moving up. Middle schools will get all of their 6th grade information moving up, and so on and so forth. Our goal is to provide data in such a timely fashion that schools can budget around resources they believe are going to be necessary, whether it's for intervention or acceleration. They have enough information to be able to go through the budget process in a timely fashion and with a lot of background knowledge. As you saw from the main view, our entire framework is built out this same way. So we push leaders to not only live in the early warning system area, but instead to also be diving into the rigor and intensity of the high school experience, the quality of instruction, which is made up of student growth percentiles, eye observation data around informal observations and walkthroughs. We also have an entire area that's dedicated to the college and career culture, so the grad rate, going to post-secondary, continuing, and so on and so forth. So we provide that same view of data that I just showed you in the early warning system. We provide that in all parts of our framework. And that's James, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and we built this system so that everyone in the district has access to it. So it's not just district leaders, but also counselors, principal assistants, all the way down to the teacher level. So teachers can come in and get access to their students' data and how it regards to all of these data points that are represented on the data tool.
This is Red at OSPI. I have a question about that. Do you guys share this access to some of the stuff with your community or even your students?
Yes. So as far as the community goes, we have a separate dashboard called our community dashboard where we report out the measurement of our strategic plan. So goal 1 in our strategic plan is around student achievement. So they can see the percent of our juniors taking the SAT and what they're scoring, and AP data and everything else that goes along with that, attendance data, all of that. We also are doing this same work. So we've done all this work around student achievement. We're also doing it around how the overall system is operating. So how subs are placed in the district, how money is budgeted, what kind of, all of that kind of stuff. So as we've built out our data warehouse, we're pulling in all data, not just student achievement data, but all finance data, all payroll data, all of this kind of stuff, and we're providing the same view so that we can measure the key performance indicators across all of our departments, not just around student achievement. And the public has a view of that through their dashboard. We also have built out a view for our community organizations. So we have multiple different community organizations that work closely with us around providing supports for students. They also have the same data. So when a student joins a Boys and Girls Club, they get some special permissions filled out by their families, and then we release through that dashboard a view of student attendance, their grades, and stuff like that, so that community organization can have some of the same conversations we're having with students around staying on time, making sure you're in school, and so on. So we're really trying to make sure that multiple different parts of the community, but then multiple different parts of our schools have the same information, so we're all pushing in the same direction.
Just out of curiosity, what did your, this is obviously a very sophisticated dropout early warning system. How did it look when you guys first started developing it? Did you guys have something running before you developed this fuller system?
And I'm going to let Jameis dive into kind of the early workings of it, and then I'll kind of add to it after that.
So when we first started this work 3 years ago, we really had just the early warning system. So we provided just a look of which students were tripping the risk factors and what was their kind of composite risk. So we could really work with those students. As we started to roll that data out, leaders wanted to know more and more information about those risk factors and students nearing those risk factors. So instead of just having one view of our early warning system, we developed some additional ways to look at it. So we had developed ways we could look at recency of behavior. We could look at students that recently crossed over those tipping points and saw their risk increase as a whole. So as we've built this system, it's grown over time as well.
I think one of the biggest learnings we had, and when this was first being developed, I was a leader, I was a principal in a school, a middle school, and accessing data to make instructional decisions or to make leadership moves was extremely difficult because it came in binders or it was large pieces of data that were sent to the school. So when they first started working on this, most of this stuff sat on the Tableau server, and we could seek out certain pieces of information to dive into. So it could be attendance, it could be discipline, it could be whatever. I could seek that out and I could dive into that data. I think the learning we took from that was our leaders wanted a framework. They wanted a way, they wanted a common language around data and what data we should all be looking at, what data we should be leading around, and what leadership moves can people make based on certain pieces of data. So our first attempt at a framework we've had for the last couple of years, this is a new one that I'm showing you right now, but it had basically 5 areas, and it had one that was student support, and one that was student learning and college and career readiness, and so on and so forth. That framework really kind of was our jump-off point to organize data in a way that leaders could actually dive in and figure out their leadership moves in a consistent manner. We've now jumped to this new view of college and career readiness where we're trying to get very specific around not only is it the academic achievement and behavioral pieces, but it's also about what experience is a kid having in high school. What about, some of those self-monitoring pieces like goal setting, persistence, and self-awareness? We need to be measuring those. So this is really where we're pulling our qualitative data and our quantitative data together into one framework and having the same conversations around those.
And the other benefit of having the framework was we were really able to be really clear with our leaders what points of data should they be paying attention to. We're providing some interpretation to that data so they no longer have to guess of what type of attendance rate are we expecting or asking our schools to achieve with their students, but they can see exactly where those goals are across the district. And also, by having it under this framework, we're able to group data points together so they can triangulate the data. So they're not looking at just attendance rate in isolation, but they're also looking at attendance rate, along with the discipline and behavior all at once.
We have a question from the field. Have there been any barriers to overcome in working with, what is that word? Sharing meaningful data with community partners.
I think initially I think it was making sure that we're on the same page when we share data. The goal is very specifically around developing positive trends in kids. So I think there was a lot of fear initially. There's been a lot of training, a lot of one-on-one conversations with our community partners, and we've been very specific about how we use data. And we're very clear with families ahead of time about you are more than welcome to not sign this release, because there's really 2 types of releases. There's one release that lets you engage in the program, and then there's a whole other release that's saying the school district is going to share very specific data with this partner. Now the parent can go through and say, I don't want that shared, I don't want this shared, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, most of the work came down to training community members who want to do right by kids, but there's times when we need to be working closely with them about how we language things and how we grow kids and how we make sure that the data does not define a kid, but instead the data informs us on how we can help grow a kid. So I think that was the biggest hurdle that we had, is how are we going to train our community partners in a way that ensures them to have really positive conversations with kids that are motivating and not, they don't separate the kid from the school district or from their program or something like that.
I have another question from my room here. Do you guys share how do you guys include parents and students in this process?
Most of the most of the sharing with parents is at the high school level. It's through the counselor. So it could be a counselor going through the framework with a parent and showing how a kid is progressing in all of those areas. Our goal, of course, is don't just show attendance and discipline. Really make sure that we're diving into student achievement and the future possibilities after graduation and things like that. At high school, we've got it pretty nailed down through either advisory or through the counselors. Middle school, most of our sharing comes through, we do Ready Step with all of our 8th graders. That's our main kickoff to parents and students understanding how the framework works, understanding a real key college and career readiness indicator and what other pieces inform that. So we have a Ready Step score, but then we'll also have attendance and credit accumulation and things like that connected with that at the middle school level. Elementary, we haven't done a very good job there yet. I think we've got a lot of work to do around what types of data do we share with parents around student achievement, but then also how are kids progressing towards some of those necessary skills to really be able to accelerate them in high school. So the note-taking and the time management and all of those types of skills and strategies, we need to figure out how on our report card or how through our conferences we can really start communicating those things clearly. We've been looking at like some of the KIP report cards, what they're reporting around mindset and some of those academic behaviors. So we're working on some of those things, but we definitely do not have we don't have that solution in hand yet.
I'm going to run a poll again real quick with our responders. We had 45% of the people that responded to our last poll said they do have a early warning system. So I'm going to ask, what do you guys out there use to identify your at-risk kids? I mean, the common ones, of course, are attendance, discipline, behavior, course grades. I'd also be interested in if you've identified other things that you're tracking with those students. And if you are having other things, please put them in the question box, in the chat box. We'd love to learn other spots that people are seeing as good identifiers of kids that are at risk. Travis, the question for you is, what kind of staffing, how are you responding to when you identify an at-risk kid? Do you have are there teams at your high schools or middle schools that are coming together, and what does that look like?
Good question. Yeah, we've got multiple different setups depending on the level. So basically, all of our levels have some form of a child study team that meets once a week and dives into the early warning system around attendance or discipline or, at the high school and middle school level credit accumulation. But they have some form of a child study team at every one of the schools that includes a pretty good group of people, counselor, principal assistant, oftentimes an office manager, and the principal, some teachers. I know some of our schools have a formal process where a teacher actually brings a family or a student into this process to talk about where they currently are and where the kid needs support to achieve at the level that we would want them to. We do, at middle school, we take it one step further where we have what's called a CAST program. I don't remember what CAST stands for, but basically it's a community group and leaders from our district that all come together at the different middle schools, and it's like an attendance board. So students that are not attending, when we bring all these community organizations together in this room and work with the family, we really sit down, and the goal of it is to troubleshoot the attendance. So here's all the different resources sitting at the table. Here's how we can help your child attend school more often. We're getting a lot of traction around that. Instead of just having a conversation as a school saying, we really need your child to show up, but we don't necessarily know the resources that you need out in the neighborhood, we're now able to meet with these families and say, okay, if there needs to be some support around mental health or dental support, we can now provide that through multiple different resources in the community. So that's really kind of been a much more positive experience, not always putting it back on the family, but instead using resources that we have access to help them to overcome situations that are keeping their child from attending. High school level, they have multiple teams. Our high schools are pretty big, between 1,500 and 2,000 students, and they have a child study that meets once a week. Oftentimes they also have a leadership team that comes together with counselors and multiple different people that are not only focused on the college and career readiness indicators and how their overall student body is progressing, but also what kids are falling out of where we would want and how do we make sure that they get the resources necessary to get back on track. So most of our high schools have two different opportunities that staff and parents and different resources are coming together to talk about student need.
That's great. I have another question from the field. How are counselors and administration working with your teachers to help support students regarding in-the-moment grade issues so that teachers don't feel like they're in isolation? Do you have any systems in place?
Yeah, and that's a great question because, I mean, in a way, we learn the hard way because you start putting, you know, number of F data out by teacher, and it becomes a conversation about the number of Fs, when really the conversation needs to be around what resources do we need to be providing to support our teachers and to support students to finding success in the class, because we don't want teachers to dummy down a curriculum to try to make sure they have fewer Fs in their class. What we do want to make sure is, first of all, powerful teaching and learning strategies are going on every single day, but if a student is still falling out with Fs, we want to make sure that there's resources on hand. So to react to that learning, we've developed some on-time programs, like we call one program I Can. It's a portion of our virtual learning program. So a student, say in 7th grade middle school math, they are plugging along, but they start doing poorly and they start failing some things. Right off the bat, that teacher can make a referral to the counseling department. The counselor will then enroll that kid in what's called the I Can program, and that student will then attend either before, during lunch, or after school program where they are just diving into that concept that they're missing. And so we've got kind of a little system set up, so if it's you know, something where a kid doesn't understand slope, that's what that kid's going to work on. It's not like retaking an entire class or doing all this. It's really when that teacher sees that that student has the understanding that they need, then they'll continue on. The kid is never removed from the class, but they are gaining an understanding of these concepts outside of the class at times. So the class can continue moving, and then we're able to catch the kid up on time. That's probably where we see the most success. I think it also communicates to a kid that we care so much and we want your success so badly that we're going to provide an intervention the minute we see you derailing.
Thanks, Travis. What are any sort of tips or recommendations for districts that are just starting to look at implementing or putting together an early warning system? Particularly, you know, is there any readiness to benefit kind of things that you would have recommending out there?
You know, I think the biggest learning I believe we had is we had to have an organizational structure for the data. And we're pretty fortunate to have, you know, a team of programmers that could design and build this in-house. Not every school district obviously has those resources at hand. And so That's been I mean, when we go around and we talk to different school districts about this work, I think that's the biggest gap is people can get at the data. They can probably teach, I mean, there's multiple different trainings you can go through to put the data in a usable visual, but the gap oftentimes comes in how they're actually organizing the data through some kind of a framework. That's where, so behind the scenes on this view that you have right here, there's all kinds of specific custom programming that enables us to host all of our data in this format. I think that's been the biggest gap, that when I work with school districts, that's where I get the most questions about, okay, I can't quite get started because I don't know how to host it. I don't know where to put the data and how to put it out there. So I think that's the biggest gap in learning. I see people getting a lot of traction around being able to put data in a visualization, whether it's through Tableau or through something else. They can do that work. It's really a matter of how do you host it in a way where leaders can grab it and make instructional or leadership moves right off the bat.
I have a couple more questions from the field, particularly about ICANN. What virtual program are you using for this, and what kind of staffing does the ICANN program use?
So we have Spokane Virtual Learning is a part of Spokane Schools. So we have our entire virtual learning department where ICANN is accessing parts of that. So if a student is struggling, like I said, like on slope, they're going to be able to access a small part of the Spokane Virtual Learning curriculum inside of middle school math. And so they'll be able to dive into slope in particular. So we've been very strategic about, we have this Spokane Virtual Learning system out here, but our director that runs all of that is incredible around providing the resources in a usable instant format for us. So it's something that's built in-house also.
Blackboard.
Through Blackboard, they're able to access it. Was there another part to that question?
Yes. What kind of staffing does it use?
Every one of our middle schools has a 0.2 staff member fully dedicated to ICANN. Sometimes that's before school, sometimes it's after school. It could be 0.1 is before school and 0.1 is after school. So it really kind of depends on the school. 0.2 is paid for by the district, and then some schools, add an additional 0.4, 0.6, depending on what the need is.
One more question from this room. What other interventions do you have besides the ICANN program are you using for students?
Well, we have multiple different learning opportunities. Like we have a program called On Track that is students that are juniors and seniors that are behind in credits. It's an opportunity for them to be able to go in and accelerate around credit retrieval. It also is connected to a lot of our STEM work and our skill center. So it's very specific around joining credit retrieval and a goal of kind of finding their passion, finding the way they want to go in their future. So we're trying to connect it to things like some of the STEM field work, some of the skill center work that we have going on. And ultimately, I know we've kind of taken the lead in the state around developing option schools and becoming a charter authorizer. Some of that is in response to the fact that we are not meeting the need of a certain group of kids, and we need to figure out how to meet the need of those kids. And it maybe isn't sitting inside of a comprehensive high school or a comprehensive middle school. Maybe it needs to look totally different. So a lot of our work around options and innovating is around looking at a niche of students that is still falling out of our system, and trying to figure out what needs can we provide early on that will make sure that they stay in our system and are finding success.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Absolutely.
It looks like our time is about up. I wanted to mention these other things that people were bringing up that they watch for with students. Two people mentioned trauma and response to trauma, and I thought that was an interesting thing. You know, the ACEs and mental health and drug abuse issues, drug counseling issues, as indicators that students might need additional support. And is there any off the normal things for you, Travis, that you guys use besides the main three?
Not really. I mean, the one thing that last year I went to a conference and I talked to Ball Fons out of California, and he had a really good point about, you know, having student achievement data in isolation of student perception of their own achievement is isolating. And so that got me to thinking, and as we do our surveying and stuff like that, we are now connecting those two things directly. So like a teacher will be able to look at their class list and look at, you know, how a student's academics have looked, how their state assessments look, how their district assessments look. But then also with that, they'll be getting a view of a student's own perception of how they persist in school. You know, what are how they view themselves as a test taker or a note taker or a strategic reader or whatever. I mean, we're really trying to combine a student's own perception to what's playing out, because I think what happens there is you can really get at a much deeper entry point around what that student needs to really engage in your class. So I think that's the only difference that we're doing. We're measuring all those same things around the early warning system, but I think we're attacking some of those perception pieces a little bit differently.
Can I just ask really quickly, Travis, how you're measuring that student perception and how often and how that process works?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're using what's called the Campus Ready survey, Epic Online, David Conley's work. So we just started using that this fall. So all of our schools, every single student, 7 through 12, took that survey, and we made it so that on the student end it is not anonymous, and so we can get student level data on their own perception of all of these different pieces. So if you look at our framework, all the grayed out areas, that's all qualitative stuff that's going to be coming back probably in the next 2 weeks from the Campus Ready survey.
Cool. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Travis. Thanks for everybody that joined. We are definitely out of time, but we have another one of these coming up next month. We'll be talking about Tier 1 supports, I believe, for multi-tiered systems support. Love to have you guys join us. Here's contact information to reach me if you have any questions about this, or I can relay this to the presenters or respond to them directly. And we will post this on the website at both the presentations and a recording of this webinar. Thank you so much.
All right,
have a good night.